Okay. Hello, everybody. How is this sound? Can everybody hear me? Okay, great. Thank you. It is 3:02, I think, so we'll get started. Hi, I'm Judith Harkins, and I'm with the Westminster Events Committee. I want to welcome you all to the presentation today. As someone who's lived in 16 geographic communities, I'm very familiar with the concept of landing in a new place and needing to create a community of your own. And this type of change doesn't have to be geographic, right? It can be a change in life or change in interest where you find yourself needing to create a community around you. Sometimes it's from going to a new place, sometimes it's where you are this whole time. And some of this community building is purposeful and some of it is organic. Either way, the connections that the community creates enhance our emotional and mental well-being, as well as creating social cohesion that can build resiliency at our personal level and resiliency in the community. In fact, the World Health Organization consistently has emphasized that social and community support are part of the social determinants of health, which are non-medical factors that affect your health and well-being. So with this in mind, today I welcome you to Stronger Together, Neighbors Helping Neighbors. Today we've gathered experts from the local government, emergency preparedness, and community advocacy to explore how we can build stronger, safer communities and promote social cohesion. Today our panel will help you contemplate the whys. And then after the presentation at our resource fair, you can look at the hows, how you can get involved in a way that feels good for you. Today's program was brought to you by Westminster Events, or WE as we like to call it. We have a milestone right now, which is WE is celebrating its 3rd anniversary this month, so let's give WE a hand. And what a 3 years it's been. But we feel very honored to be able to provide a respectful forum for people to share, for people to talk about different points of view and things that are very important to Marin County. We do this by creating speakers events that happen several times per year. And we want people to come together and, as we say, learn, connect, and grow together as a community. Our next event is going to be April 27th, and it'll focus on aging, something that we're all familiar with. And we hope that you'll come there to help learn about different insights into ways to thrive throughout your life. We're particularly thankful to those of you who have supported us in the past. So if you have volunteered, spoken at an event, or on our advisory council, can you raise your hand? All right, let's give them a hand too. Thank you. Additionally, we want to thank our action partners who are joining us for the resource fair after the panel. They're all listed on your handout, and you can come and exchange ideas with them and learn about their organizations after the speakers panel. Okay, a bit of housekeeping. We're going to have the panel speak and answer questions for about 45 minutes, and then we'll take Q&A for the audience. If you have a question, you can use the sheet of paper that was handed to you right there. You have one paper that is for questions and one paper that's for evaluations. So if you have a question, just write them down on that paper and pass them to the outside aisles, and our volunteers will come by and pick them up. If you don't have a pen, there are some pencils in the pews that you can use. And then I'll take those, and then we'll take those questions from the audience. We'll try to get to all the questions. We may not get to all the questions, but if there's something that you weren't able to have answered, feel free to interact with the speakers after in the reception. The other sheet of paper that you have is a program evaluation. And if you can just take a minute after we're done to fill that out, that gives us really valuable information about what you thought about the presentation. Our panelists have all generously agreed to stay for the reception. So really, if you can stay, have a bite to eat, chat with other members of our community and with the speakers. Okay, a final bit of housekeeping. Can everyone check that their phones are on silence? Including our moderator. Yeah, thank you. Guilty as charged myself. So now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Dick Spotswood. We're really happy to have him back. He's quite well suited for this role. Dick is a San Francisco native and a former city council member for Mill Valley and 3-term mayor. He served for 10 years as director of the Golden Gate Bridge Highway and Transportation District. In addition, he practiced law for more than 4 decades and has been involved in the Rotary Club of Mill Valley, Marin Forum, and the College of Marin Foundation. Currently, he's the politics and government columnist for the Marin IJ. His column appears on Sunday and Wednesdays. He and his wife, Joanne, live in Mill Valley. They're home since 1976, and they have 2 adult children and 3 beloved grandchildren. So please join me in welcoming Dick.
Well, thank you. It's always a pleasure to be at Westminster Forum, and it's good to see such a good turnout for such an important topic. Before I introduce the panelists, I want to acknowledge 2 people in the audience. I've been a long-time Rotarian, as you mentioned. The president of the Rotary Club of Mill Valley, Ed Marshall, is here. Ed, say hello. Ed knows something about municipalities. He's the past retired city engineer of the city of Mill Valley, so professional engineer. Andrew Thompson is a longtime Tiburon councilman. He's no longer on the council, but he has served as mayor and has prolific ability to walk door to door and meet people. He knows neighborhoods. Andrew Thompson. Let me talk about our panelists now, and we have a terrific panel for you who really have lived and been in the trenches. So that's that as it may be. Let's start with Mill Valley Councilman Carolyn Jackman. Jackman? I always mispronounce it. Carol is also a Rotarian, but also a elected official in Marin County who's dealing on a day-to-day basis with the reality of building neighborhoods and dealing with potential trouble, including wildland fire and earthquakes. Let's go to Marin Villages. There he is, John Powers. John is the Marin Villages Executive Director, and as some of you folks know, Marin Villages provides tremendous help for the aging population of Marin County. I'm not sure what aging refers to, John. I'm my contemporaries. It's nice to see you. Then let's go on to Leah Curtis. Leah is with the Southern Marin Fire Protection District, and she is the preparedness and education coordinator for the Southern Marin Fire Protection District. If you don't know, it's a growing agency. It used to be just Alto and Sausalito, and now it includes Mill Valley, and God knows where it goes next. But Southern Marin Fire Protection District is, for many of us, our provider. Then we have Matt Kramer. Matt Kramer is a neighborhood activist in the Sycamore Village area of Mill Valley. Sycamore Village is, unlike the Villages, which is a formal organization, Sycamore Village is the historic name for Matt's neighborhood. And I asked him how else to describe him, and he said, well, troublemaker, which a high compliment, because we could use more troublemakers in our local government levels. Thank you, Matt, for coming. And then we have Dr. Meg McCabe. She's the Executive Director of Programming. Dr. McCabe is the Executive Director of Programming for Fire Safe Marin. If you're not familiar with it, time to learn. Fire Safe Marin has conducted multiple events around Marin County and an educational program to let people know that they can do positive things to prevent disasters. It's basically not the stick, it's the carrot. You're giving things of advice which people can, some of us can do, not just for fire. You can do it for earthquake too. And for some of those that live near the water, sea level rise is on the out there. So just want to emphasize that. We've got some questions for the panelists, and I've got a matrix. We're going to start with Meg, and we're going to then go through numbers here. It's going to go Meg, John Powers, Carolyn, Leah, and Matt. That's the first time, and then we'll just changed every time thereafter. So the audience knows they have 2 minutes to respond to questions. They will be advised if they go over a little bit, be patient. Meg, all of you have slightly different perspectives of community engagement and cohesion. From your opinion, what's worked well?
Well, thank you, and thank all of you for being here today. This is really such an important thing for us all to come together as neighbors and really find out what we can do together. In terms of wildfire, this really is an all in it together kind of fix. And what we have found at Fire Safe Marin, which an organization that has been around Marin for 30 years. We began after the Oakland Hills fire, and many people think of the LA fires as a wake-up call. But for fire professionals, the wake-up call really began quite a long time ago. And we have recognized that wildfires today are not what they used to be. The intensity, the speed of which wildfires move through is like nothing the world has ever seen before. And so we need to really change the way we live, the way we build, and how we care for our landscape. And our landscape is really one of continuous landscape all of together. Fire knows no boundaries. And when we're going to be talking a lot about what we can do at the neighborhood level, when you think about this, it's really about what are the fuel levels, including our homes, that are connecting us all, and how can we make fire breaks, and how can we make things safer for all of us to live here? What we have found at Fire Safe Marin is that it's really about being consistent, about being clear and accessible in the language that we use to describe these actions that we all need to take. It's about motivating people and helping people to trust the solutions. Because after all of this, the past 30 years plus, we really do have the solutions. Wildfire destruction does not need to happen. Wildfires are inevitable. We will see them, we've seen them before, we will see them again. But we really do know how to retrofit and build homes and to live together safely. And so we're going to be talking about this throughout the rest of our panel discussion here, and I'll be letting you know about certain programs there are. But really, I'm here with positive advice that if we actually all work together and do a little bit of a time, but make sure we take responsibility for our part, we'll get through this and we'll survive as a resilient community.
Meg, thank you. John Power, you tell us what you have found that works in building effective neighborhoods. How do we bring ourselves together?
Great, thanks, Dick. And you had mentioned who qualifies as aging. Well, it's all of us here in the room. We're all aging here in Marin. You're going to hear from some of the panelists about a very important issue, which is how do you come together and effectively deal with emergency situations as they come up, how you be prepared for that. Our organization is working on a daily basis to meet the daily needs of an aging population here across Marin and communities across Marin. So we're a nonprofit, but we're really a social network of members and volunteers who come together to figure out how they can remain socially connected, how they can not be alone, how they can deal with some of the practical realities of staying independent in their own homes, even when they're not driving or they're less able to keep up with handyman fixes and all of that. And it was an idea that was started in a neighborhood connected to a specific neighborhood. 25 years ago, a group of neighbors living in Beacon Hill in Boston came together and said, you know what, as we are aging here, we don't want to go anywhere else. This is where we've chosen to live. This is where we've invested. This is the community that's familiar to me with all of the things that I value, including the relationships that I've built. How can I continue to stay here once my kids have grown and left? And they said, we're going to rely on one another. And so that idea has been transplanted into communities across the country and not bound by specifically a geographic place, although we are organized geographically. We have 6 villages and they're tied to logically to, our Tiburon Village, a Mill Valley Village, a Novato Village. But really what cuts across it is this idea that all of our folks are coming together with a common goal, with a common vision, and a common purpose. They all understand what that is. It's enabling people to age in their own homes independently. And they're buying into it. And by that I mean they're literally buying into it. We have members that pay to be members, although we don't turn anyone away. We have a sliding scale that keeps it accessible to anybody. Or they're investing their time. They're volunteers, like Caroline does, in her downtime, in her leisure time, works as a volunteer for us. And so the idea is that it's something that they're helping themselves. It's a self-help model. They're doing it. They are relying on one another, and so that makes it a very compelling and priority thing in their life. And we think that's a model that's been replicated in 50 different communities across California and 300 communities across the country.
John, thank you. Carolyn, you have an experience in building communities as a council member. What's been the most effective means?
Well, thank you all for being here on this gorgeous day. It didn't start out that way, but I'm happy to see you all here. This is a topic very near and dear to my heart, growing the connectedness and our communities to be more resilient. It's very top of mind in terms of being on city council right now. I will say that I've been in Mill Valley for 20 years in the same neighborhood. So that perspective gives you a real sense of the ebbs and the flows and then the different circuits that people are on in your community. So I've been there for 20 years, also a practicing attorney, and then recently ran for city council back in 23. And the reason that I did run, the main motivation was because I loved our community and I really wanted to give back. And at the time I felt like, yes, this is something that I could do and contribute to. And part of it was also wanting to have that connection. So before moving to Mill Valley, we lived in the city. And there's when you're young, starting out your career, you love being in the city, you love that energy. And there's a certain part of that anonymity that you also love, right? Because you're crafting your professional image, who you are as a person. But there came a time when I really wanted to have that connection. I really wanted to have it in a small community, and that's what brought us to Marin. In addition to working up here as well, I will say. It's very practical that way. But that connection in that neighborhood, that familiarity was very important to me. So, but from the city council lens, from the government lens, there are actually 3 different things that I have seen that have been very effective in terms of creating community and cohesion. And these 3 things, I made notes because I never know if I'm going to get another audience like this again. But these are really important. This is what I've learned so far. Bringing people together through shared projects and a shared vision. So beautification projects in your community. You get volunteers together, you're working together for the community, you meet new neighbors. Simone is here today. I met her while working on a Steps, Lanes, and Paths. It's just one example. Meeting people where they are. That's also very important. We don't always see our community at our council meetings, which is fine. We certainly love people to tune in and be engaged, but the more important thing is to meet them where they are, and that can be through neighborhood chats, which we started doing, as well as being present in your community, downtown, just having these casual conversations. Those are really where the connections happen. And then the third thing is knowing and relying, leaning on the organizations and the groups that are already in place in your community. So we have neighborhood associations, but they're very sporadic throughout town. But creating that relationship with that neighborhood association and being open and available to answer any questions or just come by and check on things, that's important. And then I will say that as we move forward, the other part that's really important is to be able to communicate. So trying to figure out what is the most effective way to communicate what is going on in the city, how we coordinate and collaborate with our other agencies and organizations to make sure that the messaging that goes out is consistent. So we have to be flexible in that because, as you know, the way that we've received information has greatly changed from print media and getting newspapers on your doorsteps to having a number of different sources available on the internet that sometimes are verified, sometimes aren't, then just to friends and family. So effective ways of communication is another important aspect to it.
Carolyn, thank you. Leah, from your perspective and from the perspective of the Southern Marin Fire Protection District, what have you learned about facilitating community engagement? What works?
Thank you. Again, you're not going to hear us stop saying this, but thank you all for showing up today. I know tonight you have perhaps a little entertainment through the awards going on, so I'm hoping we can get through all of your questions and build the connections with each of you that are so important to the work that I do at the Southern Marin Fire District. What has worked well? When I was looking at that question, and thank you to whoever crafted that, it's what's working well now on this side of an emergency or disaster, and then what works well, as my grandmother would say, the proof is in the pudding, right? What worked well after the event, whether it's a small emergency or a disaster, that's where we show the resilience and what the payoff of all the work that each and every individual is putting into emergency preparedness. So much like Caroline, showing up where people are at. We have 40 to 50 events, engagements throughout the year that we show up to across our jurisdiction. And it can be as small as a living room chat, or it can be as large as an event at the community center in Mill Valley with 700 individuals coming to that. We want to be where you are and have solutions, not just tell you about all the problems that we face, about all the earthquakes and wildfires and tsunamis and all of these issues, these risks and vulnerabilities that we have, but we want to give you the solutions. So what does that mean for you? You don't have to be like all of us in the weeds, and it may look like that, but actually we all work together. All of our organizations work together. We work with residents, we work with community organizations, we work with local government and the county level and state level, and it goes beyond that. We have to all bring what our skills and our commitment and our availability looks like and bring that to the table in our own neighborhoods. So one of the programs we have is neighborhood response groups, and that has worked well, back to the question of what works well, because you get those different skills from the community members who are closest to you, who could be the person who responds fastest after a disaster, who could be the person who takes you to the hospital or checks on you or you evacuate in a wildfire. Knowing who has skills, who has different resources available and who has different needs, and connecting those people together in a very, very local way is where we're seeing things working very well. And that goes back to the testing the resilience, which I hope we don't have to do in a big way, but that's why we do the work we do on this side of emergencies. We prepare so that we don't have those bad outcomes, that we are a little bit better off and a little bit more protected and bounce back from that. So it's the connections. It's from the ground level, the home level, the individual level, all the way up the government level, working together so that we all come out of this a little bit better.
Leah, thank you. Matt Kramer, you're at the grassroots level. Your neighborhood, from my recollection, is pretty well organized and pretty cohesive. How did that happen? What works to bring other neighborhoods together?
Thanks, Dick. Yes, just a smidgen of context. So I live in the neighborhood I grew up in, Sycamore Village, near Sycamore Park. And my family's been there since the neighborhood was built in '45. So 4 generations of my family have lived in the neighborhood, including my son Andrew, who's with us today. So I had a bit of a leg up as far as knowing folks and being part of things. And forgive me for referring to notes because I didn't want to leave anything out. But one word you're going to consistently hear today is connection, connectivity. That's what works. That's what brings us together. So in my realm, in my myself and my staff, just me, is consistent in-person outreach. I have the luxury now of being retired, and I walk the block, and I walk and I talk, and I connect with people. as I do so, checking in, right? I offered to, I'm the kind of, I'm that neighbor that's going to help you with that project. So when somebody says, oh God, that fence has got to go, it's like, yeah, well, let's get some tools and let's do it. Do I have something else I could be doing? Yeah. It builds bonds, it builds connection, and it lasts. Hopefully longer than the fence. I organize social gatherings, everything from taking somebody out for coffee to larger scale block parties within my neighborhood where we, pull people together, to something I started a few years ago I call Friday at 5. Young families in my neighborhood are super busy. They don't have time to scratch their nose, much less plan something, organize something. They're just trying to feed the kids, get the homework done, and some laundry. So Friday at 5 is a quick throwdown in a quiet spot of the neighborhood, put up a table, bring some chips, bring some sodas, tell a few key people, and let everybody know, hey, winter's behind us, spring's here, come on out, see everybody, and we have some new neighbors, and you're going to want to meet them. So that's a quick throwdown event that we do. When I'm talking to a neighbor and somebody walks by and I have a sense that maybe they haven't met, I always introduce people. Because sometimes they live one street over, but they've never met. And people can be shy, and it's like, oh, hi, and they think maybe they met them and forgot their name. So because I always do, I reintroduce and introduce people as we go. Very importantly, as people move into the neighborhood, I go to their door with my card, knock on the door, say hi, introduce myself. I give them my card with my phone number on it. I don't ask them for anything, and say, if you need anything, call me. I'm just around the corner. Some people are moving into my neighborhood. They know the lay of the land. They know where all the good food is and all that. Other folks are coming, typically, mom, dad, one kid coming from San Francisco. They don't know where to get a nut or a bolt or, anything else they might need. Or referrals for really good, electrician, plumber, workers, things like that. Those things matter. Quick story about that. Folks moved in, 2 little kids, like 4 and 5 years old. I did my, here's my card. A week later, my phone rings, and it's a number I don't know. A week later. Phone rings, I don't know this number. I answered anyway. Hello, Matt, it's Carol. Oh, yeah, we just met. Yeah, hi, Carol, how you doing? My husband and I are hopelessly stuck in San Francisco. We can't get out, and the kids' daycare is closing in 15 minutes. Can you go pick them up? Absolutely. Just tell the school Uncle Matt's on his way, and get the kids and bring them back to my house. You think that didn't create connectivity and bond, right? So, yeah, there you go.
Good story. Yeah. The next question, we're going to start this time with John. The term neighborliness, you might even want to try to define that, but the question is, how do we create and foster neighborliness in our communities? John.
Well, I'm going to assume, since embedded in this question is this idea that a neighborhood was and is a good thing, that it's a good thing to be in neighborhood with one another, right? And I think we know that that's true because when I think about neighborhoods, I think about connection to people who I know, who I can rely on, looking out for one another, being there, having common interest, all of those things. You may or may not have that with your literal neighbors, but I think that whole concept is something you can seek out in all the different ways that you're involved, in your life, whether it's in your work life or your personal life or your community activist life. And so I just think the same concepts that applied when people were maybe not pulled in so many different directions, when there were, people at home that would keep track of whose kids were running around and where they were. And so that made my parents feel comfortable to say, go ahead and go, we'll see you at dinner time, and when I was off to the 7-Eleven, as a third grader, but it's because I wasn't alone, there were people looking out. And so I think it's, one thing is to look for those same concepts, the things that you have gotten or get from your neighbors, look for that in other aspects of your life.
Good, John. Carolyn, neighborliness, how do we foster it? What is it?
Well, I actually really like John's response in terms of neighborhoodliness and what does that mean, and it's really community. When I think about it, I'm thinking about fostering the right conditions and not forcing connections. And my God, if we had somebody in Matt, like Matt, in every neighborhood who could be an ambassador like that, I mean, it would be really good trouble. But that's what we're striving for, to be honest. We want that feeling that you can have somebody in your community, in your circle, that you can depend on. What becomes really important is just the neighborhood because of the locality, right? So that piece is really important. And so we want to foster the connections to be happening on a regular basis, but also informally. So it's more natural. You don't have to come to or organize a block party and all of the logistics that go along with it. Getting out in your neighborhood, saying hi to people that you pass by, like Matt, introducing yourself, making yourself available, letting them know if they have any questions that you're there for them. That's just really important. Another piece is neighborhoodliness comes when you work on an area in your neighborhood that needs a little more attention. I mentioned meeting Simone, working on steps, lanes, and paths that we have in Mill Valley. So those are in almost every neighborhood in our town. Getting involved in that community project is really important because that is what fosters connections. That's what fosters this informal, just casual getting together. There's no expectation other than you're there to helping the community. That's it. That's how you're spending your time. That's how you're choosing to spend your time, and that is really important. And I would just say, just to be patient, because it's these small, frequent moments, those are the times that you're going to start to build those community bonds.
Leah, the question is fostering neighborliness, and before you start, I'm going to mention my neighborhood. I lived there for 40 years, and we all knew the people next door across the street, but other than that, we didn't know them. It took us our effort to become a fire-safe community to really foster connections. And it just didn't go just fire-safe. People got to know each other. What do you find works?
Yeah, so I will say to me, neighborliness, which I believe is a Spotswoodism, we might call it a sense of belonging, being able to have an open conversation with another neighbor, with someone in your community, whether that's like Marin Villages, that perhaps the whole neighborhood is Mill Valley, or the whole neighborhood is Tiburon, or it's down to your street or your local government, and so on. It's being able to have that open conversation about, this is something I'm dealing with. This is a risk when we're talking about the work I do, emergency preparedness, and educating the community about the services we offer. We want to see that connection and that honesty of how can we work together in this? How can we look out for each other? And we do see that. There's someone in the audience tonight who I met at an event, and she brought her neighbor today, and they've had home inspections and some of the free services that we offer, and it's blossoming from there. It's pollinating across homes and across borders and across jurisdictions. We want to see that connection. We don't all have time and energy for that. We can't all be the social butterflies like Matt maybe, who's flapping his wings through the community. But whether you're walking your dog or you have time to volunteer in a bigger way, we want to see you do something, right? We can all do one thing, whether it's 5 minutes of emergency preparedness, signing your neighbor up for alerts because they don't know how, and that's a barrier for them, or building stronger connections and really looking out for each other and going to the level of picking someone's kids up from daycare. That connection shows us as a district that you care about each other, and we have ways to support you as well in that. So,
Leah, thank you.
thank you.
Well, Sycamore is a neighborhood. What do you think works to foster creating that sense of neighborhood?
Everything I said before. And I'm a people person, but I think when you take time with people, you walk by, wave, say hi, but if you take time with people, take time to get to know them, get to know their kids, and you got to get to know their dog, right? it's for me, if your goal is to create neighborhoodliness, it's if I could use the analogy of baseball, you're only going to hit a home run if you step up and take a swing at it. And if that's your goal, sometimes you have to. I think people have to step outside themselves a little bit, and take that moment with someone you don't know. We have, where I live, down on the flat, we have the luxury of geography. We're physically pretty connected. I think for folks that live up in the hills, it's certainly more challenging because, to Dick's point, you might know the people across the street and maybe on either side, but get around that turn, possibly not. So, but always worth making that effort. Yeah, I think that's enough.
All right, thank you. Good. All right, well, it's time for Meg to sum up the question of neighborliness. How do you foster it?
Well, I'll go with neighborhoodliness, and the comes back to that concept of a neighborhood being a very important physical space that we share when it comes to wildfire. And fire-wise neighborhoods are our response and our major way that we help neighborhoods and neighbors get to know one another and work together with a shared sense of purpose, with the connection, with this sense of doing something important together. And I think that effort of reaching out with a shared purpose, a shared concern, and a shared goal goes a long way in making connections and helping people really see the value for themselves to join in. And how many of you are in Firewise neighborhoods that are here today? Is a few. We have 75 Firewise neighborhoods in Marin, one of the most in the country. We have 50,000 people involved, residents who are involved in Firewise neighborhoods. And the way we structure it is actually very much along the lines of what we're all talking about. The first thing that is what part of the universal Firewise actions is to make a contact list and get to know your neighbors. Mm-hmm. And it's really to make that list that says, who are you, who are your kids, who are your dogs, what's your phone number, and this becomes a kind of neighborhood, a shared neighborhood directory in most cases. And it becomes the bonding point for getting things done around the neighborhood, including fire resistant work and fire mitigation work. But on top of that, then we encourage quarterly or biannually meetings, full gatherings of the neighborhood. Then all of the Firewise leaders meet once a month, sharing what's working within their neighborhoods with all the other Firewise sites. We introduce them to experts and what the particular forefront of the discussion. Lately it's been about insurance, about some of these risk maps that have been coming down, so that the leaders really hear from the people who are at the forefront of this information, and then they can share it with their neighbors. So it's this notion that we have a network of information going out. Then there's the idea that in Firewise neighborhoods, regularly they walk the neighborhood. They look at what needs to happen, what progress has been made to kind of calibrate where they are and really celebrate the successes along the way, as well as pointing out some of the shared projects that need to happen. They also collect data about where we are. And in the Firewise neighborhoods throughout Marin last year, $12 million was invested by residents in fire mitigation work. This has to do with fuels removed from their properties and improvements made to the home. There was also 204,000 volunteer hours associated with Firewise neighborhoods. And when you start looking at this is all, some of the neighborhoods are very large. Some of them have 1,000 homes. Some of them have 20 homes. And this is really just an incredible swell of community action. And I would invite everybody to consider joining or seeing if you are in a Firewise neighborhood. We have maps on our website at firesafemarin.org, And you can look up and see where the nearest Firewise neighborhood, and if you contact us, we'll help you start one. The other way we foster neighborliness, I'll save that answer for another question.
Thank you, Meg. Caroline, we're going to start with you this time, and the question is, what is your experience getting different groups, for example, government, community organizations, and private citizens to work together? And I'll include the business community in that too. When I was a neighborhood association president, we always regard the chamber as another neighborhood. Caroline.
That's a very good point. Mill Valley Chamber of Commerce is very active in our community and is one of those stakeholders that you always want to consult and get involved in what's going on in the city. So usually when you've got the different stakeholders coming together, it's over shared concern or a shared issue. So one of the first things I do, it's probably not applicable necessarily to a neighborhood group per se, but do your research. Understand the issue in front of you. Also understand other people that are working on it to get their sense of where things stand, an idea of their best practices that maybe can be applied to your community. And the other thing is to be clear about the goal. What are you trying to accomplish? Is there a time frame in mind? And keep that always top of mind, because you're going to want to be either patient or know when to push things along. The other thing is to clearly define the roles of the people involved. So for me, it's city staff, it's going to be organizations, and then it's going to be residents or the businesses. So what we want to do is bring everybody together and take their best in terms of what are they willing to contribute, what do they want to contribute, and then where are their skills? Because together we want to put that all together, and in order to effectuate a good, it could be a proposal or a plan, at least some idea of what your action items are going to be, and you want to have all those different perspectives in the room. The other aspect that's really important is to listen before taking action. And again, that goes to taking in all the different perspectives and giving everybody equal time at the table. That's really important because it's also a way to build trust. You need people that are involved and they're volunteering their time, they need to know that they are being heard. So that's a really important aspect, is to listen more than you talk. It's been very valuable for me. And then the other aspect is Marin County is actually unbelievable in terms of the number of agencies and organizations that are doing really great work in and around the county. So for my community, I always look to see what local organizations are doing similar work and to bring them in. So for example, we've got Clean MV that does work throughout our community, as well as Rotary. So you want to engage those partnerships because you can then amplify your efforts together and you can build on the momentum that's already in place.
Leah, what do you think? What's the best way to get, from the government's point of view, you're a fire district official, what's the best way to get and encourage community cooperation?
Well, I second everything Caroline said, so I will be brief, because no matter if you're doing that at the personal or local government level, it's a version of that. It's a version of that cohesion, knowing who the subject matter experts are, knowing what other organizations are doing so that we can lean into that same goal that she was talking about, so that we can identify those risks, those issues that we're all trying to solve, and do that together more effectively. And I'll just take another second to remind everyone, you might think, and it might appear sometimes that someone else is doing the work. We have to do it individually. What you do individually does matter. It's not just your neighbor taking care of their home or their space. It's that whole neighborhood. It's the whole community. It's our cities, our towns, our county as a whole, and it goes up and up and up from that level. Everything that you do does have an impact, whether it's on your individual home or at a larger scale in the community. And that's the same way we work together. We work with our partners, and I think some of what I said earlier spoke to that as well. But knowing the key players, knowing where those resources are, and connecting folks who need that together so that we can accomplish what we're out to do. Yeah.
Great. Okay, Matt, you've worked with all the government agencies that you can think of in Mill Valley, but it's a unified city with one governmental agency in the county. How do you have your neighborhood work well with both the county and the city?
So, just on a strictly on a personal level, I had signed up and served on our Emergency Preparedness Commission. Preparedness was something that was always near and dear to my heart. My father served in the Mill Valley Police Department for many, many years, and my mother raised 6 kids, so talk about having to be prepared. That was part of the DNA. I've made a point of reaching out to, especially at the very, very local level, people like our city council members, our city manager, police chief, fire personnel, and have a relationship with them ongoing in that then when things come up, a concern or in the moment that's maybe not a 911 but darn close, we have a relationship and we can reach out and capitalize on that. When neighbors, I live down on the flat, so we're at lower risk for fire, but at a much greater risk for flood. And so, we've had some relatively serious events down in the neighborhood. And so I have made a point of connecting neighbors with city leaders and other folks that to work things out, to have discussions, and to meet. When you do have a gathering, a more formal gathering that's going to include a lot of people, my staff and I have always made a point of bringing our city leaders and city staff into the mix. Everybody wins. It's like, I've never met our mayor or any mayor, and we have so many wonderful people involved, giving their time personally and professionally, that connecting the dots, connecting people in the neighborhood with those that serve them, everybody wins.
Thank you. Meg, you have lots of experience in this area. What do you think has worked best to get communities, government, everybody on the same page?
Well, I'm going to say yes, 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 and when in the fire world, what really has been amazing is I've been with Fire Safe Marin for 5 years, just as Measure C passed and the formation of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority. And I have had the real amazement and pleasure of watching independent agencies, jurisdictions, everybody doing things their own way, coming together, recognizing the best of practices, and really none of us are anywhere close to where we were 5 years ago. All of our messages are now consistent pretty much across the jurisdictions, and we're working together, and we all know one another, and all of this kind of personal connections that has been said so far is really the way to go. And so I think that as we think about who else, so the fire agencies and all the emergency things in the government are working together. Now we're looking out, so how do we get all the neighborhoods together, and how do we get industry a part of this? And Fire Safe Marin is working with landscape professionals and with contractors and with real estate agents, and we're coming up with training programs that help them to get involved in the wildfire preparedness effort. And this is really important because I'd say that probably the most common question that we get, one of the most common questions we get from the public is, how do I find a contractor to change my vents? How do I find a landscaper that knows what to do? They don't. They don't know about this yet, by and large. And we've been working with Marin Builders Association, and they said that it's typical to when the ADU law passed, the contractors that knew how to build ADUs and knew what the whole codes were and everything made a mint. But the rest of them, nobody was prepared for this. We have such a demand for this kind of work in Marin, and the industries just aren't there yet. So that's just another way that we have to continue to think about all the different partnerships that we need to form to make a united effort in this one task of keeping us safe from wildfire.
John, working with the senior community, what are you doing and what can we do to foster that connection, particularly among people who are over 65?
Well, this applies to all of the efforts. You know, obviously, I'm representing in some ways today the nonprofit sector, although I also live in a neighborhood. I live in Kentfield, and I'm the MAT in my neighborhood, but I really got to step up my game, that's for sure. But what strikes me is that we talk about collaboration among sectors. When you think about it, though, we're not talking about nameless, faceless bureaucracies. We're talking about people, and it's often the same people that you come across. I mean, I don't know how many times you show up to an event like this or something else related to being engaged and active in your community, and you see the same people there, and they are involved in nonprofits, they're involved in their neighborhood association, they may work for the city or the county, or they're in elected office. Like I said, Caroline volunteers for Marin Villages. She's on the Mill Valley City Council. She has a work life, so she's connected in all kinds of different ways. And I would just say, if you want to accomplish anything, find the doers, find the people that are plugged in all kinds of different ways, and make sure that you develop a relationship with them and rely on them and be one of them. And that's how you get stuff done, is relying on the personal relationships that you've cultivated across sectors.
Thank you. Next question, and we're going to start this one with Leah. Leah, how have you and your organization best evaluated the strengths and needs of the communities you work with? And I know those communities' strengths and needs differ greatly.
Absolutely. They do differ. I think we've heard a lot about wildfire. Again, when we're talking about public safety and hazards and disasters, you might be in the flats and be concerned about sea level rise or flooding. You might be up in the wildland-urban interface and be concerned more so about evacuation and home hardening and wildfires. We make sure that we show up in the community. It goes back to almost every question we've answered so far. Showing up in the community, knowing what our community needs, connecting with those doers and those personalities who are going to be advocates in their own community, and go back and share what we have given them and the resources that we have, the education that we have, and those opportunities that we're here. We're here to show up, and we're here based on those connections. We can do so much more in the community. So finding out those strengths and those needs, I mean, it's integral to the Neighborhood Response Group program. Not everyone has the capacity or the personality maybe to volunteer, but you do have 5 minutes. So we want to give you what you need, the education and the skill sets and the mindsets to take back to your community for those neighborhood conversations, those dog walks, those conversations by the mailbox, to say, oh, did you know there's a free service with Southern Marin Fire that you can have your vegetation chipped and taken away through their chipper program? Or there's an assessment, you're worried about something around your home, improvements that you can make. Firewise communities will often lean into us to come and speak to their neighborhood on the block where they are, to find out exactly what they need, what they're concerned about, so that we can solve that all together. And I think that's where the strength is. It's being connected with all of you and knowing that we have an open door and we're here to serve you in the best capacity that we can. So we show up.
Thank you, Leah. Matt, you're I want to call it a typical neighborhood, but a neighborhood. You're active in your neighborhood, and people in their neighborhoods tend to know instinctively, almost, what their strengths and weaknesses of those neighborhoods are. What are the strengths and weaknesses of your neighborhood?
Strengths and weaknesses, that it's striking that balance. Folks that can do and are willing, and those that have needs. Very typical, and the needs might be on either end of the age spectrum. It might be the younger family with kids. It might be the 89-year-old across the street who used to help me with my stuff, right? So consistency for me is something that works. I keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on with people. We do have a fair number of seniors in the neighborhood, and some of them live alone. So on those rare days, when it's 103 in Mill Valley, nobody has air conditioning. checking in, making sure things are okay. Are they cool enough? They have everything they need. Anything from the store? You okay? That kind of thing. But it's the consistency. It's the consistency of connection. And again, I have the luxury of being able to connect with a lot of people frequently, but it's taking the time to know that you're there for them, that they're part of your life and you're part of their life. I'll leave it at that.
Consistency of connections. Really, that's a really good phrase. Thank you. Meg, let's go on and see how, in your field, how do you evaluate strengths and weaknesses from the various communities you deal with?
Well, it comes back to being there and getting feedback from the community. And the main ways we do this is we have an ambassador program that we have people trained up to go and be underneath the Fire Safe Marin tent. Tonight we have 2 of our star players out in the room, the resource fair tonight. But we last year we did over 80 events, and we've had 8,000 engagements. And each one of those engagements, each one of those events, we have reports that we say, what are people concerned about? What are people confused about? What are some of the myths that are out there? What do we need to? Are our materials addressing what they need to be? These are things that continually make us rework and improve our programming and our offerings. We also have, we pay a lot of attention to our digital world, and we look at Google search, and we find out what people are searching for, what they're curious about, and if we don't already have something there, we make something for it. We also are in constant contact with our Firewise. And then the biggest information that we get is through the home evaluation program. There are, as I said, almost every home in Marin has been evaluated, but only about 50% of people have opened their reports. That's a big problem for Fire Safe Marin to really work on getting. How do we get people invested enough to go to marinwildfire.org and look at their reports? Because the report has a personalized plan and a priority list of what every home should do to lower their risk. So the county has invested a tremendous amount in this program, and we know what needs to be done. So the big sticky point, which is what we need all of your help with, is how do we get people invested in the point that takes, this is my responsibility, and I need to open that report and see what it is. This isn't going to the insurance companies. It isn't for anybody but you, and to help your neighbors and to be a good neighbor to people.
John, the multiple communities is part of the question here, but when I read Marin Village, I see an S at the end, plural. You work with multiple communities. How do you evaluate in each of those communities some of their strengths and some of their weaknesses? They obviously must differ greatly.
Yeah, it's a great question. Again, I think I mentioned earlier in my remarks that this was the village model was one that was born out of a single neighborhood, a literal neighborhood in Boston. And we've sort of reapplied that concept to communities across Marin here. And so we're organized around 6 geographic villages. But what we offer is the same across all of them. And what that is support and social connection to older adults who are living independently in their own homes and want to remain there as long as they can and as long as they are able. And we do that consistently. So we're providing support, practical day-to-day support like rides to medical appointments and groceries. We do grocery shopping for people and handymen and handywomen fixes in their houses, walking their pets, all really practical things. We've contemplated and the way that we feel like we meet their needs is because we get to know them, we know them personally, and we listen to them, and we ask them. And we've been posed with the question before, since we have these 6 villages, one area that we don't have a village in is the canal. And so we've been asked in the past, well, shouldn't we develop a village in the canal that might be unique from our San Rafael village? We have a San Rafael village, but it's largely not a village that's Spanish speaking. And so we went directly to the source. And so I reached out to Canal Alliance, to my counterpart at Canal Alliance, Omar, who runs Canal Alliance, and said, hey, can you tell me a little bit about the needs in the canal and whether or not we're a good fit? We weren't assuming that our model was a good fit. And he said, come back in 10 years. And I laughed, and he said, no, I'm not joking. He said, do you know what the average age is in Marin County? And I didn't. And he said, it's 47. Do you know what the average age is in the canal? It's around 30. It's just over 30. It's a really young community, and the people that they're mostly working with are younger. They have different needs. And the older adult population in that community is in a different situation than many older adults in the rest of the county. They're living with their families. They're providing childcare for their children, for their grandchildren, to be able to work and the like. And so it reminds me again that we're not to assume that a solution that we've come up with applies to everyone, that we instead need to have the humility to ask where we might be of service. And so that's how we've approached it. We just one more thing, we were invited to have a discussion out in West Marin about forming a village out there. And one of the first questions we got from citizens, from residents out in West Marin was, not question, was a statement, was we don't need anybody from East Marin, I didn't know that was a thing, but it is, coming in to save us. We can provide for ourselves. And I said, well, good, because I wasn't offering that. And whether or not, but we'll gladly work with them on figuring out whether a village or a village model of tapping the local community for volunteers and support for their seniors is the right way to go.
You mentioned West Marin. I know from friends who are in government in Sonoma County, they have the same situation. Coastal Sonoma and coastal Marin, it's the same culture. It's something we talked about it when I was in high school. I was blessed to be able, we were required to take sociology. And sociology kind of leads us into the next question. Sometimes I think knowing more about sociology and less about politics, we learn more. What barriers? I have to, excuse me, Carolyn. I was going to the next question. In Mill Valley.
Yes, and I can be quick on this one. Because when I first read this question, I was thinking about the answer, and as an elected official, usually that response is, well, whoever comes to city council meetings, speaks during public open time, sends you an email. That's kind of how you get a sense of if you're meeting the needs of the community. But that's actually really a passive way to look at it, and I don't think you can be an effective local leader, at least, if you're going to be passive in that way. You really need to be active and out in the community. So one of the things is really important is to be curious and ask questions, but make sure they're the right questions, not just focused on the negative, like what problems are you facing currently? It's like, what are your strengths? What are the strengths in your neighborhood or in your community, and how can we build on them? The other part is, as Matt alluded to, in our community and in others as well, they are, because of the topography, each neighborhood really does have their own set of concerns and issues. So it's really important that you understand at that neighborhood level what those concerns are. So when we get a concern about parking in a particular neighborhood like Sycamore, you really need to go down and see it. You need to really feel it, walk in their shoes to really understand and to be attuned to those sensitivities. The other aspect is it's important to use multiple feedback channels. You should be always open to get feedback, no matter where it is and where it comes from. Be open to it, and then also maybe try new things, because that is always a possibility. Sometimes cities get set in their ways, and I'm not going to call it a particular department, but one that's filled with engineers kind of get set in their ways. So sometimes you want to say, hey, have we tried this before? And so I think you just need to be open to that.
Thank you. Matt, this time we're going to start with you. And I did mention sociology, and that goes to barriers. What barriers in your efforts in your neighborhood have you faced? How have you overcome them? And what strategies have you used to overcome those barriers?
So, Dick, would you say barriers to being connected or barriers to
working together, becoming a community,
Yeah.
becoming a true neighborhood.
It's usually fear. Someone's afraid of, afraid of meeting people. Maybe they haven't lived in a real traditional neighborhood where, your neighbor sneezes and you say, God bless you. And so it's a real thing, especially when people are new to the neighborhood and maybe they're new to the country. And so, again, for me, it's, when that's the barrier, when the barrier is someone who is choosing not to engage, well, you know what? That's their right, and if they don't want to engage, fine, and Matt Kramer's not going to arm wrestle him into it. But I am an opportunist. I look for opportunities with them. If I see them on the street and I see them looking up and they want to say hi, I make a point of giving them, a big wave, big hello, and make sure that I circle back with them and that we both understand, where they are and maybe what they want and what they need. I'll circle back to something I said previously about checking in with new neighbors. So I did that this last week. Some folks had been renovating their house and they finally got to move in. Mom, dad, and 3 kids. Grammar school, middle school, and Tam High. And so, from folks from Eastern Europe. And so I was glad I wound up saying hi, and she was too, because about a minute into our conversation, she said, I'm really glad to meet you. I've only met one neighbor next door, and the first week we were in the house, somebody egged our house. And she was surprisingly, smiley about it, and I said, gosh, and she said, and I thought I was moving into a nice neighborhood. I said, well, you did. Someone didn't put our best foot forward for you. And she too was quickly accepting of, dumb kids. I said, we still recruit from the human race with our teen population, and assured her it was a one-off and that there's a lot of great people for her to meet and look forward to, and good things to come. So.
Okay. John, you're next. I just want to mention on neighborhoodliness. When we bought our house up in the hills 45 years ago, the sellers invited all the neighbors over to meet us. That was really a big deal. It really was a big deal. So I just pass that on to you for what it's worth. John, what do you do, and what barriers are you facing, especially with the elderly, to get involved deeper in their communities?
Yeah, what barriers? I think we're presented, as a nonprofit, of course, but actually government, businesses, everybody's attuned to this, as resources are scarce or limited, right? You don't have unlimited resources. You don't have unlimited bandwidth, so you have to pick and choose how you allocate your effort. For those of us who work in the nonprofit sector or government, we want to solve everything right now, immediately. And so the idea of how do you scale an idea, how do you help more people, is a challenge. And we often look to technology, which has helped to facilitate many, many things, but it's not the answer for everything. And I know that we have, again, we on a monthly basis, we connect volunteers who fulfill 1,000 requests for help from our members. Every single month, 1,000 requests. Every single request comes as a phone call to the office and a conversation with one of the members of our office staff, because that's actually what works. It allows us to understand what their needs are and to better meet their needs. Our volunteers can go online. We put our requests up in our database, and our volunteers go online, what we call our dashboard, and they can sign up for it. And from the volunteer standpoint, it's really quick and easy. That's one of the appealing things about being a volunteer for us, is you can plug in whenever you have time. You don't have to commit to a shift or anything. But what we've discovered is the thing that makes us unique, the thing that makes us successful is that we're not transactional, that we're relationship-based, and that we try to leverage technology where we can, but sometimes the personal connection can't be replaced, and it allows us to meet the needs of our older adult population that has unique needs in a better way than otherwise we would.
Caroline, what have you found? Oh, excuse me, Meg. Then Caroline.
The barriers for getting people involved in wildfire preparedness really come down to, like everyone has said, attention. People have very limited attention, but you know, the catastrophic fires get people's attention, and insurance loss gets people's attention. But then we tried the carrot way as well. We have a wildfire prevention festival once a year that last 2 years, over 5,000 people came. And this is, you know, meeting all the local fire departments and seeing live burn demonstrations proving that the materials that we recommend don't burn and the ones that are on our house do. And we have goats, you know, people love goats. And so there's that, and there's just the invitation of all the Firewise neighborhoods really going out and meeting people where they are. We're in schools, and we're trying to really be out in the community wherever people work and play. The other big barrier is cost and the aesthetics of our homes. People do not want to get rid of their foundation plantings. And I understand it. I'm actually going to do it this week. It's taken me 4 years to decide that I'm finally going to give up those bushes in the front of my house, because I am convinced that that really does make a difference. But, you know, we need to really think about our aesthetics in compared to the alternative, and then to really seek out attractive ways that we can do this. And that is something that the neighbors can help normalize and help encourage one another by sharing their good ideas and by encouraging. I mean, I always think about the environmental movement and how Marin, I mean, it's embarrassing to forget your bag when you go to the grocery store. I mean, it's you're like, oh gosh, and I'll just take this out to my car, you know. And but I mean, we really need to normalize what we're asking the changes around Marin, and that comes from all of us and kind of the peer pressure of all of us saying, yes, this is something that we stand behind. And when the elected officials have to help and make the tough choices of making these ordinances that are going to make us all safe, we need to get behind them. And we need to be vocal about our support for the safety of our community. And lastly, I'm off over time.
No, please, the last thing.
Okay, I was going to say, and lastly, the barrier of cost. We have grants and we have direct assistance, but most importantly, we need to look at the investment in our homes and in the changes as protecting our greatest investment. And for home prices, for the insurance viability, for the whole thing, it is going to be costly. But we need to do this because it's in our best interest. That's
Meg, I have to compliment your organization for Ember Stomp, because it involved kids. And when you bring kids in, you bring the parents in. And we were there with our grandchildren, but I just want to pay a compliment.
Thank
you.
It's a community that normally doesn't participate in these things, because young families and a big Spanish community comes out, and we have all of our core material in Spanish, and it really is a very cross-sectional community that we see, that we often don't see in Marin.
You're breaking down barriers.
Yeah, it is.
Carolyn.
Well, there's two things that I already mentioned about earlier today, and that's the communications and outreach. And what we've discovered is we need to figure out what is the best way to communicate out to our community. How are you receiving your information? So that's one part. It's ongoing, actually. So we try to do as many different communication methods and see what works. And then also collaborating with different organizations, so that we're making sure that, you know, the City of Mill Valley, say the emblem is down on a flyer along with MWPA or Firewise or even Southern Marin Fire, so that we're all lockstep in terms of the messaging. The other part is, you know, the traditional outreach message or methods didn't necessarily work. So I talked to you about neighborhood chats and really going out into the community. That has been very effective, and I hope that that does continue, because what's really important is we've got some programs and services in place that will outlast your elected official. So it becomes part of that institution, so that you do actually have an ongoing presence in the community and getting that feedback. One of the great things actually about being on a panel is listening to what others have to say, because it raises things in my mind that I totally forgot about, but and it should be top of mind. And one of the barriers is just time. Everybody's very busy, and understandable, but time is a barrier for most, and also the timing of your life. So having been in town for 20 years and riding that circuit, raising kids, you have these ups and downs in terms of times and what your opportunity is for getting involved in the community and being more active than other times. And so I think part of the challenge for the city is being ready to receive, so that when you're ready to be more engaged or volunteer, that we've got something for you in place. You know, one of the things that we lost through COVID was our volunteer coordinator. So right now I'm trying to work on how do we get something similar back, so that when people are ready and interested and wanting to volunteer, they can come to the city website, log on, do a search, and find the different opportunities that are happening in our community, because right now we don't have that. So it's a lot, right now, it's us reaching out, but I would love it to have something in place where people can go and find what they're looking for. And then the other aspect that has been a barrier, and I mentioned this before, maybe I mentioned it before, was silos. Marin County is full of individuals that like to get things done. And they've got the wherewithal, they've got the energy, they've got the spirit to do it. And I liken it as to being a county of mavericks. The only challenge is that when you have silos, you've got gaps. So if somebody, or older adults, are looking for information or resources, if they go to the county website, there's so much information. It's like, where do you even start? And so what we were trying to do is bridge that gap between the city and what our community needs. So right now in Mill Valley, we've got this advisory task group that's looking at how do we make this more efficient in what the city provides in terms of programs and services. And then so we can be better prepared for our fastest growing demographic, which is those 55-year-olds and older, and I'm one of them. So that's what we're working on.
One of the advantages of a forum like this is you hear terms that Carolyn just mentioned. A barrier is time. Everybody's lives, especially young families, are busy. Well, if you had asked me to come to this forum before, I wouldn't have written that down as one of the barriers. But now I think of my own son. That's a barrier. He's working all the time. And he's got 2 kids. His wife's a nurse practitioner, and she's working all the time. And so time, that's a barrier. Leah, what do you find effective to get rid of all the barriers, even the ones we sometimes don't think about?
Yes, well, we are humble enough, I think someone mentioned humility, to know that we need to show up, and we will continually learn and adapt, as we all do, adapt to the emergencies and the ongoing impacts of climate and wildfire and everything that we see affecting our jurisdiction and our neighbors across the state. Time is a big barrier. So that's why we try to, in our outreach and our education and our public engagement, is what I like to think about as a fire and life safety educator is, if this is the one moment I have your attention, this is the one time we get to spend together for just a few minutes, what can I help you with? What can I do to support you taking an action that's going to make you safer, make your community better off? And that's, I don't have the answer, because it's multiple answers. It's multiple answers depending on speaking to you in the front, you in the sunglasses, you at the back of the room. Each of us have our goal to be safer, to live well, to connect, to be happy in our homes and live with dignity and safely and security, but we get there in slightly different ways. And although government work can be a little bit utilitarian, we still show up and we still recognize that. So I'll use an example of perhaps a barrier is understanding the risk around wildfire and the vulnerabilities that your home might have. Because of the heightened awareness around the LA fires recently, we sent out a postcard to each and every individual address in our jurisdiction, reminding folks about the resources available to them and that it was free, and that we're here when you're ready to utilize that resource. The next month on month, so January to February, that went up 12 times. Our inspections went up 12 times from the previous month. So we're happy you're keeping us busy as residents in our community, but knowing when to tap in, when to communicate, and how to communicate with our community. And it will change. And I will say, most of our volunteers skew on the older side, and they are also strapped for time because they're so engaged. So thank you again for spending your time with us today.
We're going to go to questions from the and answers from you, but questions from the audience. You'll see when I read this question why I'm directing it to Matt, and if anybody else wants to respond, but listen to the question. Matt, what's your recommendation on how to scale Sycamore's community connections, replicate them, and more importantly, how can we clone Matt?
Science can be a dangerous thing, and careful what you wish for. How can we replicate what we're doing?
I think scale, but replicate is how I'd read it.
You know, I collect quotes. I love other people's wisdom. And so, you know, if you go to some event, you know, church event or whatever, and they're having a raffle, and you get your ticket, and the sign up on the wall says, "Must be present to win." Well, if you want neighborhood connectivity, if you want resilience, if you want to build community, you got to be present. Someone has to step up. And guess what? You're somebody. We're all somebody. And that's what it takes. You know, if you live a life where things like faith and courage are important to you, faith in yourself, faith in your family, faith in your community, and the courage to step up and do what needs to be done for your family, the people you love, and the community you love, well, you know, that's what it takes. You have to find ways. Be persistent, be passionate about it, and you'll get there.
That's how you clone Matt. Meg, and this goes to everyone here. What suggestions would you make for an individual who's in a group like Firewise, Community Response, any of the community groups that we've talked about today, to overcome a neighbor's caution or fear, perhaps due to the perceived threats to safety, privacy, or security? How do you overcome that in your group, and you're reaching out? How do you overcome that fear in a neighborhood neighbor who's reluctant to get involved?
Well, I think that I said that one of the most frequent questions was about cost or something, but actually the number one is, I've got a problem neighbor, and it's his tree. And that is, and what I would encourage is, instead of looking at the neighbor's tree as the problem, I'd encourage you to look at the neighbor as the solution. And to really think about our neighbors, no matter what their disposition is and how agreeable or not they are, is to think about them as real people with fears, with the same shared concerns that we all have. And, you know, it may be offering to do something for them, or asking their permission before you start trimming your things, to let them know why you're doing things, so that it's not putting a demand straight on them. And also to take the lead and do things on your property, because I think a lot of times the people are not willing to do it because, why would I spend all this money or time doing this when my neighbor's not doing it? And there is a cascading effect in this. So I think that, you know, we all have challenging neighbors about a lot of things, not just fire. And I think that when we get to know people as people and try to be good neighbors ourselves, and if you don't have 100% in your community, don't let that be the part that brings you down. Look to the neighbors that are the doers and get the swell of support going. And this is the way we accomplish things. You know, we can't let perfect be the enemy of the good. You know, so I'd say start with low-hanging fruit, be kind, and keep plugging away at it.
Yeah, thank you, Meg. John, how do you overcome that fear?
Yeah, can I just add to that? Because it occurs to me, I do feel like people, myself included, feel like there's a lot that's out of our control, especially now, and that has just been, I think that's just been accumulating over a long time. And so what we try to do is refocus. So people can engage with Marin volunteers in one of two ways. They can come to us as a volunteer or as a member looking for support. With the volunteers, we try to lower the threshold so that they can really get engaged and just try it out. Because we know once they've gotten a little taste of it, they're going to come back for more, and they're going to want it, and we know how to sort of deepen somebody's involvement. So that's why we don't require that you commit to really, a shift or a certain number. We ask that you pick up 2 requests a month if you're a new volunteer with us, but we don't really, enforce that. So we make it easy for people to engage with us, and then we pay attention to them once they're engaged, and we make sure that their needs are being met. For our members, we certainly want their needs to be met, but we also want them to know that it's largely in their control whether that happens. I mean, our volunteers sign up to help our members on a dashboard. They choose. We're not assigning them. And so whenever we get a complaint from a member that nobody picked up their grocery shopping, and if the reality is we have to tell them nobody did it because you're super hard to shop for and you're not very grateful when they do, then it's, but we're there to help work with them on how they can figure that out. Maybe they go with their volunteer to pick things out rather than having the volunteer call all during the thing. So we're open to making sure that everybody has the feeling that they're empowered to make sure that their own needs are being met.
Thank you. Thank you indeed, John. Carolyn, you're next. I just want to mention something to pick up on that. One of the things that I know my friend, the Rotary president here, Lauren, has taught us is that an invitation helps. We can put out all the notices in the chamber wire and things like that. Join the Rotary Club. But when a Rotarian comes up and says, "Why don't you come to our club? Why don't you come as my guest?" That changes the relationship. You're no longer afraid. You're not the stranger walking in the room. Your friends, buddies with you. And I just point that out. Carolyn, what's your thought on overcoming these fears?
Well, I'd love to follow up on your comment. Is not only do you have open that invitation, but there's no expectation, right? So it's an open invitation. There's not an expectation that that person's going to be join the Rotary, for example. It only took me 2 meetings to figure that piece out. Like, I'm here, I'm for it. But to not set expectations, but to really have it be open and informal. So we're going to be getting together, for example, in my particular neighborhood, and we didn't want to set any expectations because we just wanted to make it easy for people, if they wanted to and they were available, that they could show up. So there's not a lot of logistics involved. It's a kind of a BYOB get-together. But I think that having these informal events and then trying to do it on a regular basis and then also engaging your doers, so to speak, those are what we call our trusted community connectors, for the more technical term, to actually have more trust with respect to what you're doing and to get them involved in the activity.
Leah.
And then also just being open and available, always.
Leah, well, how do you break those barriers of trust down is the question. And my experiences with a couple of neighbors in Firewise areas is that they didn't want break those barriers because they were afraid they'd be told by the fire department that they'd have to do, or they should do all this work, and they don't want to have to do that work. Is that a barrier? How do you break that down?
Absolutely. So this is a common question, and I'm glad these questions came up, and we've had a little bit of time to answer many of them. Reminder that we will all be in the back room there, so please come and ask your questions, because we all experience it, whether it's Firewise, the community emergency response teams, neighborhood response group. You're completely unaffiliated. We all have that interaction, or we get that question from an organizational level. How do I get my neighbor to do it? We've got Matt, but I'm Matt's neighbor, and I'm not getting engaged. And it's frustrating for Matt, right? And he wants to help. The doers are helpers, and they are passionate as we are about our work. But we have to meet those neighbors where they are. So our goal is always education, whether it's about the risk, the reality of wildfire risk that we face in our community, that we face across California, but giving you those resources. So again, back to those inspections, Meg was talking a little bit about home assessments. They're free services available year-round. You go pick the time and day that works for you. And then you get a one-on-one conversation with an expert. And you can ask, hey, my neighbor has this going on. Is that something I should be concerned about? Will you come out and speak to my neighbor too? We also have ways to, if you suspect a hazardous tree or situation in your neighborhood around vegetation or structurally, we have services for that as well. Because we want to get out and we want to speak one-on-one with homeowners who have control over their property, who have control and can make that change. So just a reminder to everybody here, you have the ability to make that impact in those little conversations and normalizing everything that we've talked about. You might not have the energy or be the everything to everyone all at once, but if we're all doing a little bit and sharing this information and continuing to reach out to our communities, we're all going to be better off for it. So thank
Matt, you have the honor of answering finally the last question. No, that was the last question. You're the last responder. What's your thought on breaking down trust?
Breaking down trust.
Yeah, we've already broken trust. We've broken down trust much in this country. How do we build trust? What are the barriers to building that trust?
It's step by step, right? You don't build a foundation from the top, and it's one stone on top of another. The better you get to know somebody and become part of each other's lives, you're gonna a trust will develop. Our good friend John Kabat-Zinn is famous for saying, when it comes to that kind of thing, building trust, building connectivity, the little things, the little moments, they're not little. You never know how much something you just did for or with somebody really impacts their life, and that's going to build and grow. Another thing I really stick with is the deeper the relationship you have with someone and the more they trust you, when they share with you or they're going through something that's extremely personal and they just as soon it wasn't on the internet, right? Keep what's private, private. If someone's asking about, hey, is so-and-so okay? Say, oh, they're having a hard time. They don't need details, right? So I think, something like that, respecting privacy, respecting boundaries is a trust builder.
There's one, sorry we have not had a chance to answer all the questions or even the panel questions, but we've got a lot in today. But there was one question I'm going to answer with one word from somebody in the audience. Question, could what happened in LA happen here in Marin? The answer, yes. Anybody disagree with that? No. So that question's answered for you. You got to be on your toes and beware by building resilient, together, stronger neighborhoods. I also want to point out we're having a fair outside of some of the providers here and sponsors, and I know that former Tiburon Mayor Andrew Thompson is here. He just finished walking 600 homes. His strategy in his campaign was building a stronger town in Tiburon, building neighbors. So he'll be out there with you. Am I right, Andrew? If you'd like to chat with him and get some practical on the scene advice from a guy that walked 600 houses. Hello, that's hard work. Everybody, thank you very, very much, Meg, John, Carolyn, Leah, and Matt Kramer. Great group. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you, everybody. Can we give a big hand to not only the group, but to our moderator, Dick Spotswood? So thank you so much for panelists. This has been an amazing, amazing discussion and really important to us as a community. For everybody in the audience, I just want to say thank you for taking part. Thank you for putting in your questions. And I just ask you to please, please take your handout home that has really important websites for all these people and some other from our research that we did and some from the people that are at the fair. And also, can you please turn in your evaluations on your way out? Thank you very much.